On a stormy Thursday evening in Surulere, Lagos. The rain had fallen so heavily that the streets were flooded, and transport became nearly impossible. That was how Uduak, a young woman of 22, ended up at her elder sister's house for the night. Her sister, Eno, and Eno's husband, Jude, welcomed her warmly, asking her to settle into the guest room. It should have been a normal night, but fate had other plans. As Uduak stepped out of the guest room to fetch her charger, she passed by the master bedroom. The door had been left slightly ajar. Jude had just come out of the shower, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. He was searching his wardrobe for clothes, unaware that someone was watching. In that brief moment, Uduak's eyes caught something unusual. A strange mark etched high on Jude's inner thigh, right between his legs. The mark was dark, shaped like two triangles crossing with small dots circling it. It was not just a scar, nor something ordinary. Uduak had seen this mark once before, years ago, on a young man who later got arrested for his dealings with a dangerous secret group. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped back, heart pounding, but the image refused to leave her mind. It echoed louder than the thunder outside. That was the moment she decided, without telling anyone, that she would move into her sister's house. Not for convenience, but because she had to protect Eno. If Jude's mark meant what she thought, her sister might be in grave danger. Uduak pretended to have only just arrived in the corridor. She shuffled her slippers against the tiles to make a sound. Jude turned, smiling as though nothing was wrong. "Uduak, hope you're fine? Do you need tea?" he asked casually. His kindness only deepened her fear. And then she noticed something else. Half hidden behind his shoes in the wardrobe was a slim black envelope. She didn't mention it. She only forced a smile and walked away. But her mind had already started writing the next chapter of her life. That was the peak, the shocking discovery that changed everything. Yet to understand it fully, we must step back and see how all the pieces of this story were laid down. Uduak and Eno grew up in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State. Their bond was deep, not just as sisters but as friends who had shared hunger, laughter, and dreams. Eno, being 6 years older, carried much responsibility when their father died. She had worked hard braiding hair, baking small chops, and selling earrings at the market, just to see Uduak through school. Her famous line was, "Kindness is never wasted. Even if people forget, God will not." Jude entered their lives during NYSC. He was tall, quiet, and skilled with his hands, running a small but promising furniture workshop in Lagos. He appeared to be a man of integrity, one who spoke little but acted much. When he came to ask for Eno's hand in marriage, he brought his uncle Umo along. His humility impressed everyone, and when he promised, "I will protect your sister and her family bond," the family believed him. Their wedding was filled with dancing, laughter, and tears of joy. Life in Lagos was busy, but Jude and Eno's home became a refuge for Uduak whenever the city pressed her too hard. Their neighbor, Werlu, often greeted her warmly, offering to help fix gadgets. Jide, a church member, checked in on her regularly, and Simi, her childhood friend, never stopped sending voice notes full of jokes and warnings like, "Lagos can hide a goat in a sack and you'll call it a pillow. Shine your eyes, my sister." For a while, everything looked perfect, but slowly cracks began to show. Eno's smile stopped reaching her eyes. Jude's phone, once left casually on tables, became glued to his pocket. And once, when Uduak visited unannounced, the hurried whispers and scattered hair on Eno's head left her suspicious. Still, she brushed her doubts aside, reminding herself of Eno's mantra: kindness, patience, empathy. Then came that rainy Thursday. The towel, the mark, the hidden envelope, the decision. The night passed quietly, but Uduak could not rest. The next day was calmer, cooking, cleaning, sending small help to a colleague's school fees. But by midnight, the calm cracked. As Uduak rose to get water, she noticed the master bedroom door half open. The envelope that had been hidden behind Jude's shoes now sat openly on the dressing table. Before she could even move, she heard voices, one from Jude, one from a man she did not know. The stranger spoke in the kitchen. "If you follow the mark, you cannot be touched." Her blood ran cold. Lightning flashed, revealing a shadowy figure with a brown package in his hand. He did not belong in that house. As the package exchanged hands, the light went out. Footsteps moved toward the corridor where Uduak stood frozen in the dark. She held her breath, praying the floor would not betray her. The stranger's hand brushed the wall near her face, ready to switch on the light. And just then her phone lit up, buzzing with a call from Simi. The glow revealed her face. A sharp voice pierced the silence. "Who is there?" The stranger's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. His words were sharp, filled with suspicion. "Who is there?" Uduak froze, her back pressed to the cold wall, her phone still glowing in her palm. For a moment, silence stretched across the corridor. Then Jude's footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. The stranger shifted, his shadow moving toward the door. Uduak's heart hammered so loudly she feared they could hear it. She quickly silenced her phone and slid it into her wrapper pocket. "Relax," Jude said in a low tone. "It's just my wife's sister. She's sleeping here for a few days. She probably woke up to get water." The stranger hesitated, his voice still sharp. "You're sure?" "Yes," Jude answered firmly. "She knows nothing." Those words, "she knows nothing," burned into Uduak's ears. She stepped back carefully into the guest room, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her whole body trembled. She had seen enough to know her suspicions were no longer imagination. Something was happening in this house, something dark, and Jude was part of it. But she also knew she could not reveal anything too quickly. If she shouted or accused him without proof, Ino might not believe her. Worse, she could put herself and her sister in danger. For now, she had to pretend. Pretend to be blind. Pretend to be deaf. Pretend to be unaware. But in her heart, she decided, she must uncover the truth. The following morning brought a less extreme calm, as if the night before had been nothing more than a bad dream. Ino bustled about the kitchen, humming as she prepared yam porridge. Jude acted normal, even playful, helping to set the table. The envelope was nowhere in sight, and the stranger had vanished without a trace. During breakfast, Ino looked at her sister with warmth. "Uduak, I'm so happy you're here. Having you in the house feels like old times in Yuyo. You make me feel less alone." Uduak smiled, forcing the memory of last night into the background. "I'll stay as long as you want," she replied. The day passed with small moments of kindness. Ino shared stories from her office, including how she helped a colleague raise money for her child's hospital bills. "Kindness is never wasted," she reminded Uduak, repeating the line she always loved. They laughed together in the kitchen, peeling vegetables and trading gossip about their cousin Umo, who was rumored to be planning another wedding. By evening, the house was filled with the aroma of fried plantain and egusi soup. Even Jude joined in, teasing Uduak for cutting the plantain too thick. For a moment, the home seemed normal again, filled with warmth, laughter, and family love. But beneath the laughter, Uduak's mind replayed the voices from the night before. "If you follow the mark, you cannot be touched." What did that mean? What was in the envelope? And who was the stranger carrying the brown package? Night came quickly. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and cool. After dinner, everyone retired early. But Uduak couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned on the guest bed, listening to the house breathe in silence. Around midnight, she heard it again. A sound like paper sliding across wood. The same sound as before. Her pulse quickened. She rose quietly and tiptoed into the corridor. The master bedroom door was locked this time. But from the thin space beneath it, she could see a faint glow. Voices murmured inside. Jude's voice, low and firm, and another, softer voice she didn't recognize. She leaned closer, trying to catch the words. Suddenly, the door creaked open a fraction, and Uduak stumbled back. From inside, Jude's eyes met hers. His face was calm, but his gaze was hard, as if he had been expecting her. "Uduak," he said softly, stepping into the corridor. "Why are you awake at this time of night?" Behind him, she thought she saw movement in the room, a shadow slipping out of sight. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could answer, Jude's hand tightened on the doorframe. His smile was too perfect, too forced. And then, in that tense silence, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen, glass shattering against the floor. The sound of glass shattering in the kitchen broke the silence like a thunderclap. Jude's head snapped toward the noise, his jaw tightening. For a brief moment, his mask of calm slipped, revealing a flash of irritation. "Stay here," he told Uduak in a voice that left no room for argument. Without waiting for her reply, he strode down the corridor toward the kitchen. Uduak's legs trembled, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. As soon as Jude disappeared around the corner, she crept closer, peeking from the shadows. The kitchen light was on, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. Shards of glass sparkled under the bulb, the remains of a broken cup scattered near the sink. Jude stood there, not alone, but with a man Uduak had never seen before. The stranger was tall, with a narrow face and sharp eyes that scanned the room as if expecting danger to leap out from the walls. He bent, picked up a piece of glass, and muttered, "Careless." "It doesn't matter," Jude replied quickly. "Clean it up before Ino wakes." The man's eyes flicked toward the corridor. Uduak ducked back, her heart slamming in her chest. She pressed her body flat against the wall, praying the stranger had not seen her. Moments later, the sound of sweeping followed, the quick scratch of broom against tiles. Then silence. Uduak tiptoed back to the guest room and slipped under her covers, pretending to sleep. A few minutes later, she heard the sound of footsteps pass by her door. Then the faint click of the front door opening and closing. The stranger had left. Jude returned to his room without a word. The next morning, the house carried on as though nothing had happened. Ino hummed while cooking beans, smiling warmly at her sister. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, completely unaware of the midnight drama. Jude sat at the dining table reading a newspaper, his expression calm, his voice steady when he asked Uduak if she wanted bread with her beans. Uduak forced a smile. "Yes, thank you." But inside, her mind raced. Who was that man? What business did Jude have with him in the middle of the night? And what was in the brown package she had seen earlier? Later that day, Uduak went to the market with Ino. The atmosphere was lively, filled with the noise of bargaining and laughter. For a while, Uduak felt safe, surrounded by people. Ino, as usual, showed her heart of kindness, buying extra yams for a struggling trader and offering encouraging words to an old woman selling groundnuts. Watching her sister's generosity, Uduak's chest tightened. She thought, how can someone as pure-hearted as Ino be tied to a man carrying such dark secrets? When they returned home, the house was quiet. Jude was nowhere to be found. He had left a note on the table, gone to the workshop, back late. Evening came, and with it the heavy weight of dread. Uduak kept glancing at the master bedroom door, half expecting the envelope to reappear, half hoping it would never show again. But just as the clock struck midnight, she heard it, the faint scrape of paper against wood. She sat up in bed, her pulse racing. This time she would not run. She had to know the truth. Slipping quietly into the corridor, she crept closer to the master bedroom. The door was not fully closed. Through the small opening, she saw Jude kneeling before the black envelope on the dressing table. He opened it, pulling out papers filled with strange symbols, circles, lines, and marks that looked like coded messages. His lips moved silently, as though reciting a prayer or chant. Then, he lifted something else from the envelope, a small red cloth wrapped around what looked like a carved wooden figure. His hands trembled slightly as he held it up to the light. At that moment, lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the room. Uduak's breath caught in her throat. She had seen enough to confirm her worst fears. But before she could move, Jude's head turned suddenly. His eyes locked on the crack in the door. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. The door creaked wider, and his shadow fell across the corridor. The air in the corridor turned heavy the moment Jude's voice rang out. "Who's there?" His eyes narrowed, scanning the dim passage. The crack in the door widened, and the golden light from the bedroom spilled across the corridor floor like a trap. Uduak's breath caught. For a second, she was certain Jude had seen her. Her legs refused to move, her body stiff like stone. But then, behind him, Eno's sleepy voice floated into the room. "Jude, who are you talking to?" Jude straightened quickly, hiding the envelope behind his back. His tone shifted to something calm and easy. "No one, love. I thought I heard a sound." Eno rubbed her eyes and yawned. "You worry too much. Come back to bed." Uduak slipped backward, her heart pounding. The cover of her sister's interruption had saved her, but just barely. She returned quietly to her room, every step heavy with fear. She knew one thing now. Jude was hiding something powerful and dangerous, and that envelope was the key. The next morning dawned clear, the sky washed clean by the night's rain. Birds chirped from the trees, and the scent of fried akara filled the air as Eno prepared breakfast. The house looked ordinary, peaceful even. But Uduak knew the truth hidden beneath its walls. At the table, Eno chatted happily. "Uduak, I'm thinking of starting a small foundation for girls who can't afford school fees. Even if it's just 5 children, it will mean something." Uduak smiled faintly, her mind still replaying last night. She thought of Eno's kindness, her endless giving spirit, and felt a sharp ache in her chest. If only she knew the darkness she was living with. Jude entered the dining room late, wearing a crisp shirt and dark trousers. He greeted them warmly, his face a mask of charm. "Good morning, ladies." He kissed Eno lightly on the cheek before sitting down. To anyone else, he looked like the perfect husband. But Uduak could not erase the image of him kneeling before the carved figure in the night. Later that afternoon, Jide stopped by to deliver a package from church. He was cheerful as always, teasing Uduak about her quietness. "You're in Lagos now, my sister. Shine your eyes. Don't let this city swallow you." Uduak forced a laugh, but her silence lingered. Jide noticed the tension, glancing at Jude before leaving. His expression carried a question he did not voice. Evening came and the house grew still. Eno retired early, exhausted from work. Jude pretended to read a newspaper in the sitting room, though Uduak noticed his eyes were unfocused, his mind elsewhere. She retreated to the guest room, but she could not sleep. Around midnight, the scrape of wood against wood returned. Her pulse quickened. She rose quietly, this time determined not just to peek but to act. She slipped into the corridor and crept toward the master bedroom. The door was ajar again, and Jude was inside, this time not alone. 2 men sat with him, both strangers. One was the sharp-eyed man from before. The other was shorter, with scars across his arms. The black envelope lay open on the table between them. Papers covered in strange symbols were spread out, and the small red cloth rested in the center like a sacred object. Jude's voice was low but firm. "The time is close. The mark will guide us. But we must keep the house secure. No mistakes." The scarred man nodded. "And the sister? She watches too closely." Uduak's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. Jude's jaw tightened. "She knows nothing. But if she becomes a problem." He did not finish the sentence, but the silence that followed was heavier than any word. At that moment, Uduak's slipper shifted against the tile, making the faintest squeak. 3 heads turned toward the door. The scarred man rose quickly, his eyes sharp as knives. "Someone is here," he said. Uduak's breath caught. She turned to run, but her wrapper snagged against a nail on the wall. The fabric pulled, holding her back. The bedroom door flung open, and the scarred man stepped into the corridor. His eyes locked on her. "There she is," he hissed. And in an instant, the quiet house turned into a battlefield of shadows and fear. The moment the scarred man's voice rang out, "There she is," the silence of the house shattered. His eyes, sharp and dangerous, fixed on Uduak like a predator spotting prey. Uduak's body froze for a heartbeat, but survival screamed louder than fear. She tore her wrapper free from the nail, the sound of ripping fabric echoing in the corridor, and bolted toward the sitting room. Her bare feet slapped against the tiles, her chest heaving as she ran. Behind her, the man's footsteps thundered. "Catch her!" he barked. Jude's voice followed, urgent and low. "Don't harm her. Just stop her." Uduak's hands fumbled for the front door, but the heavy bolt refused to budge. Her palms grew slippery with sweat as she yanked and pulled. The scarred man closed in, his shadow stretching across the floor. At the last moment, another sound broke through. The creak of Ino's bedroom door. Her sleepy voice called out, "What's happening? Uduak, is that you?" The scarred man froze. Jude rushed forward, grabbing the man's arm before he could lunge. His voice was calm but sharp, like a knife hidden in silk. "Not now. Go." The two strangers slipped quietly out through the back door, leaving only the echo of their footsteps. By the time Ino reached the sitting room, Jude stood alone near the corridor, his face arranged in calm control. Uduak, her chest rising and falling rapidly, forced herself to step back from the door and act as though nothing was wrong. "Sorry, sister," she said, her voice trembling. "I had a bad dream. I wanted fresh air." Ino sighed, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "You frightened me. Please go and rest. Night is for sleep, not running around like a thief." She turned back toward her room, never noticing the tension in Jude's jaw or the sweat on Uduak's brow. When the house grew quiet again, Jude fixed his gaze on Uduak. For a long moment, the silence pressed between them like iron. Finally, he spoke, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You saw nothing tonight," he said. "For your sister's sake, keep it that way." He walked past her into his room, closing the door softly behind him. Uduak's knees buckled, and she sank onto the sofa. Fear and confusion twisted inside her. She thought of Ino, so kind, so trusting, sleeping peacefully in a house full of secrets. She wanted to scream, to shake her sister awake, but something stopped her. Jude's words lingered like poison. For your sister's sake. Morning came with deceptive peace. Ino prepared a rich breakfast of jollof rice and fried fish, humming as she worked. Jude joined them at the table, cheerful, as though nothing had happened. He laughed at a story from Ino's office, asked Uduak if she needed transport money for her errands, and even complimented her cooking from the previous night. To anyone else, he looked like a perfect husband. But Uduak knew the truth. Behind that smile lurked something dark and dangerous. Later that day, she met Jide outside the compound. His sharp eyes scanned her face. "You don't look fine, Uduak. Are you sure everything is okay in that house?" Her lips parted, the truth begging to escape. But fear clamped her throat shut. She forced a smile. "I'm fine, Jide. Just tired." He frowned but said nothing more, pressing a small Bible into her hand. "Read Psalm 91 tonight," he said softly. "Lagos is full of shadows." That evening, the house grew quiet again. Uduak lay awake, clutching the small Bible, her mind restless. Should she confront Jude? Should she warn Ino? Or should she run and never look back? Just as sleep began to pull her under, a new sound stirred her awake, the faint creak of the front gate. She rose, peeking through the window. In the dim moonlight, she saw Jude slipping outside, a black bag in his hand. Her pulse quickened. Where was he going at this hour? Driven by fear and curiosity, Uduak wrapped her shawl tightly and followed quietly behind, keeping to the shadows. The streets were silent, except for the distant barking of dogs. Jude walked quickly, his steps firm, until he reached a parked car at the end of the street. Two men stood waiting, the same strangers from before. Jude opened the bag and revealed what was inside. Uduak's breath caught as she pressed herself against a wall, struggling to see clearly. The men leaned in, nodding in approval. One of them muttered, "This will be enough for the next step." And then, under the faint glow of a streetlight, the scarred man lifted his head and glanced around. His eyes swept the darkness, closer, closer, until they stopped exactly where Uduak was hiding. His lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "She's here," he said. The words struck the night like a clap of thunder. She's here. Uduak's blood ran cold. Her body pressed tighter against the rough wall, her heart hammering so loud she feared they could all hear it. The scarred man's smile widened, his finger pointing toward the shadows where she crouched. Jude spun around instantly, his eyes flashing in the weak streetlight. For a moment, his mask of calm slipped, revealing panic. He stepped forward, his voice a harsh whisper. Uduak, what are you doing here? Uduak's throat dried, words choking in her mouth. Her legs screamed to run, but fear glued her feet to the ground. The sharp-eyed man laughed softly, a sound that slithered like a snake. I told you she was watching too closely. The scarred man started forward, but Jude raised a hand, blocking his path. Leave her, Jude said quickly. She's my wife's sister. She won't say anything, right, Uduak? His eyes bored into hers, desperate, commanding. Uduak swallowed hard, nodding weakly. I won't. The men exchanged doubtful glances, but Jude's authority held them back. Still, the scarred man's voice was a growl. If she becomes a problem, you know what must be done. Jude didn't answer. He simply turned, grabbed Uduak's wrist firmly, and pulled her away from the group. His grip was strong, almost painful, as he marched her back toward the house. When they entered, he released her abruptly, slamming the door shut behind them. His voice was low but fierce. What were you thinking? Following me like that? Do you want to destroy yourself? And your sister? Tears welled in Uduak's eyes, but fear swallowed them back. I just wanted to know the truth, she whispered. Jude stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling. Then his expression softened slightly, though his tone remained firm. The truth is dangerous, Uduak. Some things you don't want to understand. For Ino's sake, stay out of it. He walked past her into the bedroom, leaving her trembling in the sitting room. The rest of the night stretched endlessly. Uduak lay awake, clutching the small Bible Jide had given her, whispering prayers under her breath. Each creak of the house felt like footsteps. Each gust of wind felt like a warning. Morning came, but peace did not. Ino bustled cheerfully in the kitchen, preparing pepper soup, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She smiled at Uduak, asking if she would like to join her on a trip to the market later. Uduak forced a smile, hiding the turmoil twisting inside her. That afternoon, while Ino napped, Uduak sat outside the compound, staring at the street. Worlu, the neighbor, walked by and stopped. Uduak, you look worried. Is all well? She hesitated, then shook her head quickly. I'm fine, Uncle Worlu. But Worlu was not convinced. His old eyes narrowed, and he leaned closer. You are not fine. Remember, Lagos has ears. If you need help, speak. He walked away slowly, leaving her with his cryptic words echoing in her mind. As evening approached, Jude left the house again, claiming he needed to check something at the workshop. Ino, tired from her day, stayed behind. This time, Uduak didn't follow. Fear chained her to the compound. Instead, she sat by the window, watching the street. Hours passed, and the house grew silent. Then, just past midnight, she heard it again. The scrape of the wardrobe door, the rustle of paper. The black envelope was out once more. She crept silently to the corridor, peering through the crack of the master bedroom door. Jude knelt before the table, the red cloth and wooden figure in front of him. His lips moved in a strange chant, words she couldn't understand. The air in the room seemed heavy, thick, charged with something unseen. Suddenly, his voice rose, fierce and commanding. He pressed his hand to the mark on his thigh, as if drawing power from it. The carved figure seemed to glisten in the dim light, as though alive. Uduak gasped softly, stepping back, but too late. The floor creaked under her foot. Jude's head snapped toward the door. His eyes met hers through the crack, burning with fury. Uduak! He shouted, his voice like thunder. The door flew open, and he stepped into the corridor, the wooden figure still clutched in his hand. The sound of Jude's voice roared through the corridor. Uduak! His face was no longer calm, no longer gentle. His eyes burned with a fire she had never seen before, his chest heaving as he clutched the carved figure in one hand. Uduak stumbled backward, her hand pressed to the wall for support. The corridor felt narrower, the air thicker. She wanted to scream, but her voice was locked in her throat. Before she could run, Ino's door creaked open. Her sleepy face appeared, hair falling around her shoulders. "What is it? Why are you shouting at my sister?" Jude froze, the mask slipping back onto his face in an instant. He forced a smile, hiding the figure behind his back. "Nothing, love. I thought I saw a rat in the corridor. It startled me, that's all." Ino frowned, unconvinced. She turned to Uduak, who stood trembling, her lips pale. "Is that true?" Uduak opened her mouth, the truth fighting to escape, but Jude's eyes bore into her with a silent warning. "For your sister's sake." She forced a weak nod. "Yes, I thought I saw something too." Ino sighed. "Both of you are making noise in the middle of the night over a rat? Please, let's sleep." She returned to her room, shaking her head. Jude's smile vanished the moment Ino closed the door. He stepped closer to Uduak, his voice low and sharp. "This is your last warning. If you don't stop, you'll regret it." He turned and shut the master bedroom door behind him, leaving her trembling in the dark corridor. The rest of the night passed slowly, filled with fear and restless prayers. By morning, Uduak's body was weak, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but she forced herself up, determined not to crumble. At breakfast, Ino was cheerful, chatting about visiting their cousin Umo in Ajigunal. "He says he has good news for us," she said brightly. "Maybe he's finally ready to settle down." Uduak nodded quietly, though her thoughts were elsewhere. Jude sat across the table, calm and collected, eating as though nothing had happened. His charm returned easily, but Uduak saw through it now. Every smile was a mask. Later that day, Simi called Uduak. Her voice was full of energy, but quickly turned serious when she heard the strain in Uduak's tone. "Something is wrong, isn't it? Talk to me." Uduak hesitated, her eyes darting toward the master bedroom. "I can't say now, Simi. Just pray for me. Pray for my sister." Simi's voice softened. "I will. But remember, when shadows get too close, you must bring light. Don't keep silent." The words lingered in Uduak's heart. That evening, the family visited Umo. His compound was noisy, children running around, neighbors laughing in the background. For a while, Uduak felt a rare peace. Umo, with his booming laugh and wide grin, welcomed them warmly. He spoke of plans to start a small business, his excitement contagious. But as the evening wore on, Uduak noticed Jude excusing himself frequently, stepping aside to take quiet calls. His voice was low, but his expression was sharp, tense. Each time he returned, he covered it with a smile, fooling everyone except her. When they finally returned home, Ino was tired and went straight to bed. Jude disappeared into his room, claiming he needed to prepare for work the next day. Uduak sat in the guest room, her mind restless. She could not sleep. Something was pulling her. An urge, a need to see what was inside that black envelope once and for all. When the house grew silent, she slipped quietly into the corridor. The master bedroom door was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly, praying the hinges would not creak. The room was dim, lit only by the streetlight filtering through the curtains. On the table, the black envelope lay untouched. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She opened it carefully, pulling out the papers inside. Strange symbols covered the pages, circles, triangles, and words in a language she could not understand. At the bottom of one page was a drawing of the same mark she had seen on Jude's thigh. Her breath quickened. She reached deeper into the envelope and pulled out a folded photograph. It was old, faded, but clear enough to see. The photo showed Jude standing with 3 other men, all with the same mark visible on their bodies. Their faces were stern, their eyes cold. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the room. Uduak's head snapped up. Jude stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. The black envelope slipped from Uduak's trembling hands, its contents scattering across the floor like fallen secrets. Jude stepped into the room, his figure blocking the only exit. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched around the doorframe. "I warned you," he said, his voice calm but filled with menace. Each word landed like a blow. "You should never have opened that envelope." Uduak's knees weakened, her breath shallow. I didn't mean." "Silence." Jude's voice cracked like a whip. He bent, gathering the papers with swift, controlled movements, his eyes never leaving hers. The room grew unbearably tense, the silence broken only by the sound of his breathing. For a moment, Uduak thought he might strike her. But instead, he leaned close, his whisper sharp and chilling. "If Ino ever finds out, you won't live to see the next morning." He snatched the photograph from her hand, tucked it back into the envelope, and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Uduak collapsed onto the bed, tears streaming silently down her face. The warning echoed in her ears, heavy as chains. But deep inside, she knew, no matter the risk, she could not stay silent forever. The next morning dawned bright, but the house felt darker than ever. Uduak moved carefully, her body heavy with fear. Jude acted as though nothing had happened, sitting at the table with a newspaper, sipping tea. His calmness frightened her more than his anger the night before. Ino, cheerful as always, hummed while frying akara, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She smiled at her husband and sister, her eyes full of trust. Uduak's chest ached at the sight. If only she knew. Later that day, while Ino went out to buy groceries, Uduak sat in the sitting room. The silence was thick. Jude entered, standing over her, his shadow stretching across the floor. His voice was low but firm. "You think you're brave," he said, "but you are playing with fire. One wrong move, and it won't be me who suffers. It will be your sister." Uduak's heart pounded. She wanted to speak, to fight back, but her lips remained sealed. She could only stare, fear and defiance battling in her eyes. Jude leaned closer, his whisper sharp. "Tonight, you'll learn how serious I am." He straightened and walked away, leaving Uduak shaking on the sofa, the words burning like fire in her mind. That night, the house was heavy with silence. Jude locked himself in the master bedroom, but Uduak's spirit was no longer chained by fear. She remembered Simi's words, "When shadows get too close, bring light." She picked up the small Bible Jide had given her and held it close. Moments later, Ino returned unexpectedly from her errand, earlier than Jude had planned. As she entered, she saw the black envelope fall from his hands. Papers scattered across the floor. Symbols, photographs, and proof of everything Uduak had feared. "Jude, what is this?" Ino's voice trembled. Jude froze, his mask shattering. Before he could answer, Wurlu, the old neighbor, appeared at the door with 2 policemen. Uduak had gone to him secretly earlier that day, whispering everything she knew. The policeman stepped forward. "Mr. Jude, you are under arrest." Ino's knees weakened, tears filling her eyes as she clutched her sister's hand. "Uduak, you saved me." Uduak squeezed back, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "Kindness is never wasted. You taught me that, sister. And now it's kindness that saved us." As Jude was led away, the storm that had hovered over the house finally broke. The sisters embraced, their tears washing away the fear. For the first time in a long while, Uduak felt peace. Not just for herself, but for her sister. The darkness had been exposed, and light had returned to their home. And in that moment, they both knew. The bond of family, tested and tried, would never be broken again.